Steeler fans, welcome to the Steeler Extravaganza, brought to you by BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, known as The Hangover. Now, The Hangover typically is reserved for us to go 24 hours after the fact or so and digest the game. So instead of knee-jerk reactions, we can go ahead and figure out what went wrong, what went right. Yesterday, plenty went wrong as the Pittsburgh Steelers fell to the Seattle Seahawks at home by the score of 28-26. Let me bring in my good friend, Tony Defio. Tony, how are you this evening?
I'm good, Brian. How are you? It's great to be with you again. I wish it was under certain better circumstances, but we'll get through it.
Yes, so definitely the Steelers fought 0-2 on the season, but you know what, look, we're Steeler fans. We have been around this rodeo for a long, long time, and there's more pressing issues because Ben Roethlisberger was announced today to have had season-ending knee surgery. And so I am going to start out with something that just popped up. And this popped up just about, I would say, about 15 minutes ago. And this is a message from Ben Roethlisberger and regarding his circumstances. Because, you know, right away when something like this happens, Tony, we have people that are speculating end of the career. At 38, he's not going to want to rehab. There's so many things going around that, you know, this is the end. They need a tank. So many things. But he had season-ending elbow surgery. And there's so many things to speculate and look at. And we'll go into that. But this is a statement from Ben Roethlisberger. And before I go into the statement, this is going to be a show that we're going to, I widely anticipate to have a lot of people on it. Normally, we take comments all throughout the show on The Hangover. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and wait until we ask for questions. So if you do put in a super chat question and you do throw in something in the pot, we appreciate that. But let's wait until a little later on so we know we can get to it, not to be distracted, and go ahead and talk more about the issues and figure out. Oh, gosh, I am going to read a comment. If I said knee surgery, I do apologize. I have a friend going through knee surgery right now, and so I already screwed up. No, season-ending elbow surgery. So here's the statement from Ben Roethlisberger. I've been informed that I need season-ending. Okay, I just lost it. Season-ending surgery on my elbow to continue playing football at the level I expect. This is shocking and heartbreaking for me to miss this much of a season and feel like I'm letting down so many people. I can only trust God's plan, but I am completely determined to battle through this challenge and come back stronger than ever next season. The Steelers committed 3 years to me this offseason, and I fully intend to honor my contract and reward them with championship level play. I will do all I can to support Mason and the team this season. This season to help with games. I love this game, my teammates, the Steelers organization, and fans, and I feel in my heart I have a lot left to give. And that just came out on Twitter. I found that just about 20 minutes ago. So we do have a lot to go ahead and talk about. So we'll go ahead and do that. First thoughts. Let's start with you, Tony. What were your first thoughts when this all happened?
Well, I mean, it's very sobering. I mean, we call this show The Hangover, and it's a very sobering. You know, we look forward to 2019 all off season. We talked about it. We were optimistic, and you know, I'm still optimistic, obviously, but you know, it's a harsh reality when you lose a quarterback of Ben's stature, everything he's accomplished, everything he means to this organization. You know, if you look at the odds of what happens to other teams when they lose a quarterback of his level, they're not really good as far as going on to have a good season. So from that perspective, it's very sobering. And you know, quite frankly, I'm surprised when you really think about it. He's made it this far without having this kind of an injury, because look at Tom Brady. 11 years ago, he had a season-ending injury in Week 1. So, you know, for him to make it this far, you know, is a testament to how tough he's always been. But at the same time, you know, I'm glad to hear him say he's determined to come back, because I want to see him play again and accomplish some more great things for the Steelers.
Yeah, that's my thoughts as well. I mean, look, Ben Roethlisberger has given this organization so much, and the organization has given it right back to him. So I'm not ready to hang up the gold watch and go ahead and say, like, all right, don't let the door hit you where the good Lord splits you. I'm not looking to do that. I'm looking at saying, get well, get back, and we're looking for a silver lining in this entire thing, and hopefully that Mason Rudolph plays so well that there's a huge competition going on next year, or maybe at that point, maybe tough decisions to be made. But so that's what we're really looking at here right now. The team has, David DeCastro said it best by saying that he was going to go ahead and stand behind Mason Rudolph, because this is a guy that really, really wants it. He's like, this guy works. He plays hard, so it's something that that you're hoping that now, as a number one guy, and he is the number one guy in Pittsburgh right now, and he will be for the rest of the season, because the team is committed for him to be there, and hope that he is able to go ahead in and take this team far. We've seen it in the past where backups came in and played very well. Here's an interesting guy that was a backup many years ago that came out of obscurity and led his team to a Super Bowl, and it's Jake Delhomme. And Dave Schofield just mentioned in the chat that Jake Delhomme, he was back in 6 months. But and that's not what I'm bringing up right now. What I'm bringing up, though, is something from Chris Mortensen. And this is something that came out a couple hours ago. And I'm reading this from his Twitter, at Mort Report. When I called Jake Delhomme very early this morning, he didn't even say hello. It was, "You're calling me about Ben Roethlisberger, aren't you?" As soon as I saw it, it looked just like my injury, the UCL tear in right elbow, which led to Tommy John surgery in October 2007. So really interesting. But look, we can't speculate what the injury is until it's said. We can't know about the surgery. But I do have we have guests at our house right now over for dinner, and so my wife is entertaining them right now, and it's a family member of a very well known orthopedic surgeon in Ohio, and I was talking to him earlier. I reached out to him, and he was telling me about the procedure, and he's someone that I maybe, after we find out exactly what was done in the surgery, the diagnosis, I would love to get him on the show, and that's a possibility. So we could look towards that for the future. But right now, what we're looking at before we go any further is we need to think about this, and this is what the theme of the show is tonight: is can we find a silver lining in this cloud that is the injury to Ben Roethlisberger? So we really have to look at what is good in this situation. Now, there's nothing good in the fact that the man was injured and is gone and out for the year. That's not what we're saying. But as a business and running it like a business, and as fans, we expect to turn on the game next week and root for Steelers win, unless you're one of those that I know some people that are looking for 0-16 and tank for Tua. Tagovailoa, I could not pronounce his name. I'm not going to try to unless I have to. But you know what? Miami's not going to try to win any games either. And look, that's not what I watch football for. I don't watch football to tank. Mm-mm. I watch football to root behind the guys. And Tony and you and I have a point counterpoint article coming out later on in the week, and it's about the 1989 season. And they started at 0-2 as well. They didn't really have a quarterback change, but they did some extraordinary things with probably less talent that is on the field right now in Pittsburgh. So with that being said, we have to look for the silver lining in this cloud. And it's definitely a cloud. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. But Tony, where were you watching the game last night? Yesterday, excuse me.
My apartment.
So, and then what was your first thought?
About the game or about Ben's injury?
About the injury.
Well, I mean, I was hoping it would be something minor during the game, but obviously that changed today. But as far as my thoughts on the silver lining, I think the silver lining for moving forward is they'll get to see what they have in Mason Rudolph as far as can he really be the heir apparent to Ben Roethlisberger, because he's going to have a 14-game interview essentially to do that. And anybody who's saying they have to tank for some unknown quarterback who's in college right now who may or may not be good, I don't get that at all. Because if you have the guy under roof right now who could be the heir apparent, you have to find out. You owe it to yourself as an organization to find out if Mason Rudolph is that guy. So if there's a silver lining moving forward, it's that. Say Ben would have played the next 3 years and not gotten hurt, and both he and Rudolph's contracts were up in 2021, and Ben says, I'm retiring now, and I endorse Mason Rudolph as the starting quarterback moving forward. Well, how do the Steelers know that he's really that good? Look what happened with Brock Osweiler a few years ago. He had 7 games, and people were forced to throw money at him, and he turns out he wasn't the real deal. Now they get to see if Mason Rudolph is the real deal, and I think they're going to know a heck of a lot more about him by the end of the season than they do right now. So I think that's one silver lining you can take from yesterday and from the injury.
Now, here's something about what happened yesterday. I was actually watching the game with Dave Schofield in my living room, and it was Dave and I watch the games completely different. I'm a fan. I've always been a fan. I'm not saying Dave's not a fan, but Dave is a coach.
Yeah.
He has coached football. He has played football at a very high level in high school, had opportunities to go Division I. Just a very intelligent football mind. And that's one of the reasons I talk about Dave all the time. Sure, I'm friends with Dave, but I'm a colleague with Dave too on Behind the Steel Curtain, as you are, Tony. And he is different to watch a game with because he is looking at he's looking at the same TV screen, but he's watching the game from a completely different angle. And as soon as that happened, I didn't even get a chance to notice the elbow. I noticed the elbow. I was like, oh, he's grabbing his elbow. But before I could even really notice it, Dave's like, oh, that's not good. That looks like, and he was like, look, I don't know, but that looks like that's a Tommy John type deal.
Wow.
And I mean, and not that, and then he prefaced it with like, I don't know. I mean, because this is just something you shout out.
Right.
But he was like, wow, he looks really hurt. And then we watched him go into the locker room, and he's like, Bryan, he's hurt. And this is a big deal. And you know what? And here's the thing, and I've heard it mentioned on the radio today, and I've heard it mentioned in a lot of places, that, Ben Roethlisberger, and we've talked about it on the show, is the kind of guy that he'll accentuate the extent of an injury during the game to look more heroic. And look, I'm not embarrassed to say that about the guy. That's just truth, and that's not a rip. But you could tell yesterday that something was completely different, and that's something I noticed. So throughout the second half, I was listening to what Dave was saying about it, and it seemed more apparent that Mason Rudolph was going to be the quarterback going forward, just from our conversation. So with that being said, you kind of, this news was not a shocker today. So, I mean, of course, I'm sure your phone lit up like crazy, Tony.
Oh yeah.
And mine went nuts, and I was at a business lunch day, and all of a sudden, it's going crazy. I'm like, oop, I got to put this on silent. And then now it's buzzing and vibrating. You're like, oh. But, and that's right when it happened. It happened right at lunchtime. And I'm like, gosh, I need to get to this, but I've got to do my other job right now. So, here's the thing. We could lament on all the personnel losses. This is essentially right now, no killer bees. Right now, of the 3 main ones, there's none. But if I'm looking for a bright spot, the bright spot I'm looking at are some key young personnel that, like you said, has an audition and they have pride. And first of all, you will never see you will never find me an NFL player that says they're tanking for a college player. You will never see that. But these guys they have pride to prove, just like they did in the preseason game. Those guys fighting for jobs, the fourth preseason game against Carolina, it meant the world to them. So these guys are fighting for pride, trying to prove that they can go ahead and play and they could make the playoffs. And I know it's 13% if you start off 0-2 to make the playoffs, but 13 are with 0-2 teams. And one of those teams was when Tommy Maddox came in the middle of week 3 to save an 0-3 season and make the playoffs. And I'm sure they're different teams. We also talk about something we could talk about too with the Pittsburgh Steelers is the fact that you had Ben Roethlisberger come in week 2 in a loss against the Baltimore Ravens when the team went 1-1, and he won the next 14 games. And I've heard people say, well, that was a completely different team with a great defense. And you could say that, but that's also a team that was 6-10 the year before, warranting the pick of Ben Roethlisberger. So, I mean, you can't look at yesterday and yesteryear, but what you can look at is how did the team look under Mason Rudolph yesterday in 1/2. And so that's my next question to you, Tony. Where would you grade the performance of Ben Roethlisberger? Excuse me, Ben Roethlisberger's replacement, Mason Rudolph.
I'd give it a solid B. I think he looked really, really good. I mean, it's tough to just be thrown in there in the middle of a game and perform. You saw how Josh Dobbs struggled with that last year when Ben left the Oakland game with a rib injury. He didn't look good at all. Ben had to come in and kind of rescue the day. And Landry Jones, with the exception of the Cardinals game, when he first came in, he struggled in that situation. In the playoffs against some other teams, against the Patriots and everything. So for him to come in and look as good as he did and to shake off the interception that he threw, which is his first or second pass, even though it wasn't his fault, it was Moncrief's fault, it still it would have rattled most young quarterbacks. So for him to come in and show fire, show poise, show spunk when he ran for the first down, he got up and did the first down thing. I was impressed by that. I was impressed by his emotion when he threw the second touchdown pass to McDonald late in the game. So I thought he looked really, really good and really decisive. And I'm sure he's going to have some growing pains moving forward. But based on yesterday, there's hope that he could be decent this year.
You know what? There is definitely hope. And, I felt, and I told you this from preseason game 1, I thought that this was a much different Ben Roethlisberger. Excuse me, I keep on saying that, and I apologize. I thought this was I
know what you meant.
Much different Mason Rudolph. And so at that point, I'm thinking that he has better footwork. He is more poised. He really worked hard in the offseason to be a better player. So you've got to really like what you have here. So that was my thoughts. Tony, what did you notice about him in the preseason, even before yesterday's game?
I noticed that he was more decisive. He wasn't, he was making quick decisions. He was going through his progressions, which Josh Dobbs, even this past preseason in his third year, had trouble with. So to me, that's the number one thing I noticed, that how quickly he went through his progressions in the preseason, and you saw that a lot of that again yesterday. So I think that's encouraging moving forward.
We talk about this all the time, the jump from year 1 to year 2. It almost looks like he made that jump. It looks like James Washington is definitely making that jump as well, and we love the rapport that they have. Look, if you're a fantasy football guy and he's available and you play, James Washington's a good place to go, because Mason and James really have that rapport because they've done it throughout college to great success, and now they're going to do it on the pro level, and they have that. They're like twins. They have that
Right.
what do they call twin sense or
Yeah.
something like that, and it just feels like those guys could really do that at this level, and Juju's going to help them out. You know that. You know that not only is Juju going to help them out, but you're going to have some help from Vance McDonald, who yesterday they really looked good together at as they were playing in the same game. Something happened. We had just lost Tony, and I would expect him to come back in pretty soon, and he's actually coming back in. But Vance McDonald is a great help, and he's going to be huge going forward. And obviously, there is a great rapport. And when you think about Mason Rudolph, look, he played most of the preseason. Ben Roethlisberger was rusty the start of the year, and I will apologize for some of my comments on how ridiculous it was that he only played three series in the preseason and that being the reason that he was rusty, but maybe there was something more going on. But when you have, and here's a comment I made about the way that Mason was playing, and no, Mason did not have a plus game yesterday, but that was a pretty good debut. But here's the thing: when you're playing with these guys all year long, not just Mason Rudolph, but Jalen Samuels too looked pretty darn good when he came in, because these guys were the guys that were playing the entire preseason. And here's another big takeaway that something that I've been very big on, and it's Bryan's conspiracy theory that I always have. And my conspiracy theory has always been that and it was I kind of would do it joking, but I was like, yeah, I'm joking, but I'm not joking, that who is the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh? Is it Randy Fichtner or is it Ben Roethlisberger? And it's funny because when Mason Rudolph walked into the game and came into play and went under center, and after a series or two, I looked over at Dave and I looked at my other buddies that were in the house, and I'm like, wow, Randy Fichtner finally gets to be the OC, and this is a completely different game plan. And what they're doing, they're going to go ahead and they're going to go back to a run-first team. You're going to see a lot of play action from this team. You are going to see run setting up the pass, not the other way around. And you're going to see maybe a more balanced offense. Ben did not do a lot of play action. Ben probably led the league in lack of play action. And you're going to see that. Also, Mason Rudolph is hungry.
Right.
Mason Rudolph is young and talented. He said all the right things during his post press conference. He paid tribute to Ben right away, which I thought was fantastic. I think he looks like Sidney Crosby, if I could say that out there, and some other people mentioned that as well. He looks a lot like him. And you could tell that he has a good rapport with Randy Fichtner. So I'm really excited to see what Fichtner can really do now. He obviously has talent to be there, and I'm excited to see what Mason can do. I'm still sad that Ben Roethlisberger is not going to be the one trying to lead this team to a 7th ring, and I wasn't ready to give up at 0-2 either. But this is our reality right now.
Right.
So with this being our reality, I'm ready for the Mason Rudolph era, and I'm hoping next year to have a healthy competition with 2 great quarterbacks on this team. So that's what we're looking at. So to go ahead and close the door on the whole quarterback situation and talk a little bit about the rest of the State of the Union in Pittsburgh. Do you have anything else to say about the state of the Steelers with a new quarterback?
Well, it's like you said, it's kind of like a young pitcher, a rookie pitcher, never shaking the veteran catcher off. That's what you're going to have now with Mason Rudolph. He's not going to check out of plays, and I kind of got the feeling that Big Ben was doing that because Fichtner was his buddy, and that's his right. He's played for 16 years, but maybe it just wasn't working. Maybe it's time to go back to having the OC calling 100% of the plays, and you mentioned play action. That's going to buy him some free yards probably, and more of a running game. I think you need to get James Conner going, provided he's healthy, because we saw what he did last year, or what the offense did when it ran through him. And if it's not him, then Jalen Samuels or Benny Snell. So I think it's going to be more. You're going to see more of a balance, and hopefully some success out of this. So I'm just looking forward to taking it one game at a time, because that's all we can do right now. With you can't have huge aspirations, I guess, but you could definitely look forward to San Francisco.
Yeah, that's it. So I have not seen the Vegas line, and I'm not sure exactly what we're looking at as far as I would almost expect San Francisco to be favored, especially being the home team coming off of a big win on the East Coast yesterday, being going against Cincinnati out east. So I would think that they would be favored, but if you had points and you were in Vegas right now, and okay, Dave Schofield is saying right now -6 is that's the line right now. Thanks, Dave. So if you had money, are you taking that bet? Are you betting? I'm not asking to bet the house, Tony, but are you betting on Mason Rudolph with those 6 points, or are you betting on him straight up?
Well, I think he could. They can keep it close with him. I think a lot of it's going to depend on the defense. I think the defense showed promise yesterday, but I think it was also worn out because it got tired. I mean, they ran 20 more plays than the Steelers did, because the offense did absolutely nothing in the first half with Big Ben. So it looked a lot better in the second half. Now, granted, we found out later that he was seriously injured, so that probably had a lot to do with it. But I think provided they play a conservative game plan on offense, and I think they could definitely keep it close and keep it under a touchdown for sure.
Okay, Dave's saying that it just moved to -7 now. That's really interesting. So, look, I was thinking that we could go ahead and relive yesterday's game, but I really don't want to do this. This is about the injury to Ben Roethlisberger, and this show is about the today. It's about moving forward and finding that silver lining and in this cloud. And so we will go ahead and do that. And Tony, first of all, do you think there's a silver lining in this cloud?
Oh yeah. I mean, I probably jumped ahead earlier when I said I think this gives the Steelers an opportunity to see what they have in him, and they're going to have 14 games, hopefully, to see what he can do now, as opposed to, like, say, 3 years from now, not having to make a decision on him based on a lot of preseason work and maybe a few regular season games. Now they're going to get an entire season to see what they have in him. So I think that's the one silver lining we can take from this moving forward.
So let's go ahead and look at the team as a whole, and who do we have around him that going forward? We're starting over right now. This is a 14-game season. You're in the hole at 0-2. We've talked about the percentages, but as a fan, I don't care about those percentages. I care about the heart and soul of this team, and who are we looking at that's going to carry this team. And so first, let's talk about the running game, and let's talk about James Conner. Now, there have been a lot of questions about how's James Conner, and apparently he is good to go. That's according to that's what he's saying right now. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think Jalen Samuels actually said something as well that he was good to go as well. And Dave Schofield just mentioned that to me as well, sent me a message on it. So it kind of looks like, of course, great. Tony, it's Mason Rudolph's team right now.
Right.
But on offense, I think it's James Conner's team. And I think it's also Juju Smith-Schuster's team.
Right.
Of course, we can't forget about the line because the line has to open up those holes. And it's their team as well. And then if you're going to go along those lines, it's Boswell's team. And then we could get to the defense. But let's go back to running back. What are you expecting this injury to Ben does to James Conner?
I expect it makes him more of a workhorse, provided he stays healthy. I mean, that's been a problem with him throughout his pro career, and even in college. Not his illness, but the fact that he tore an ACL in his, I guess, his junior year or sophomore year. So it's been a problem for him staying healthy. And it's good news that he is apparently healthy for San Francisco. And you mentioned the line; he has a world-class line to run behind, and like Dak Prescott did a few years ago. He stepped into a situation, replacing Tony Romo. He had that great line with the Cowboys, and he had, Zeke Elliott to hand the ball to, a sensational rookie. So I think, not too many young quarterbacks get to step into the kind of situation that Mason Rudolph gets to step into with Pro Bowlers on the line, Pro Bowlers, in the backfield, a Pro Bowl receiver. So, I mean, I think, he's surrounding himself. He's going to be surrounded by a really good veteran cast of offensive weapons and offensive linemen. So, I think it's a good situation for him as a young quarterback.
Let's ask this question here. Does it matter if James Conner stays healthy? Does it matter who's in there at running back when you have the talent of Jalen Samuels as well? And what we saw from a 23-yard run from Benny Snell, and this was just one, even though it was a rough preseason, but we didn't see him behind a number one line. I kind of think it matters, but I think it's pretty deep. I think we saw what happened when you had to put Jalen Samuels in against the Patriots, and that was a pretty good deal. And with this line, of course, and I saw it mentioned that they need to block better, but you've got 3 Pro Bowlers on there, and that's just that is one of the hearts of your team. So, what are your thoughts there, Tony?
I think it matters to an extent, because I think you want one guy to have the most the majority of carries, but if this line, I think if it gets into a practice of blocking for the run, something it hasn't been able to do the last couple of years. Because let's face it, Big Ben is a franchise quarterback. He's going to want to pass the ball, and you had AB, and you had all these weapons to throw to. But now you're going to have to again play more conservative. So I'm not saying go back to smash mouth football, run it 50 times a game, but you definitely need more balance now. And if this line gets more practice, blocking for the run, David DeCastro, what he can do running downfield, and same with Marquise Pouncey. So if there's more of a concerted effort to run the ball, I don't think it's going to matter all that much who is the running back. And we saw, like, again, you mentioned what Samuels did last year, replacing Conner. And I think, Snell has some ability. He never got a chance to show it in the preseason. So maybe he'll get to show it now. So it matters to an extent, but it's not paramount to having a great running game with this line, I don't think.
So who is your number one guy besides Mason Rudolph? Your number one guy going forward for the offense of the Pittsburgh Steelers now that Ben Roethlisberger is not there? Who, besides the running backs, who needs to really be the go-to guy on this team?
Well, I think it has to be somebody like Vance McDonald, for example, because I think the tight end was always Roethlisberger's safety net. So I think you're going to find the same thing with Rudolph. I mean, it seems like young quarterbacks, they seem to gravitate to the tight end. They want to find a tight end. You saw, like a Lamar Jackson. I think he threw a couple of touchdown passes to the tight end yesterday. So I think that's one. And then I think you have to get James Washington in there. I mean, they have such a rapport, in the preseason. They had such a rapport in college. I remember as a Pitt fan, what he and Washington did at Heinz Field 2 years ago. I think they had 35 points in the first half. It was crazy. They went like 70-10 or something like that. It was insane what he did, not knowing that the two of them would ever be playing for the Steelers. So I think you need to get Washington in there. I think Moncrief, injured finger or not, he's not getting the job done. So I think you have to put Washington in there as your number two. And I'd go so far as to say put Johnson in as your number three receiver. Get these young guys in there, get them used to playing with Rudolph, and take it from there.
Because I think you have 4 threats to catch the ball, and that's not including the running backs. And it's those 3 that you mentioned, along with Vance McDonald. I think Vance McDonald's going to be paramount, excuse me, and going forward. Now, for me, though, this is Juju's team. He is young. He's in his 3rd year, but he has done something that no other receiver has done, including Randy Moss. He is the youngest receiver to get to 2,500 yards receiving. That's something that's absolutely fantastic. And I think he wants to be the leader of this team. And we were talking about how this injury helps a guy like James Conner and helps the running backs, but it also helps a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster, and in an odd way, because now you're bringing in a guy that will be more of a number 2 and challenge for that number 1. Everybody's saying Washington because of the rapport he has with Moncrief, and that's fantastic. But now, because of the rapport, do you have 2 number 1s? Because, I don't want to hear Juju's not a true number 1. He's the wide receiver number 1 in Pittsburgh. But now, and you saw how they hooked up on that flea flicker, which was, I thought, a very good call to help get Mason some confidence. But you know what? Now it seems like you have 2 guys that he's going to trust, because he's not going to trust Washington more than he trusts Juju Smith-Schuster at this point, because they're going to be working together to both be the number 1s. So, this is actually it's an injury that actually helps their chances there too. Of course, Ben was going to try to go to Juju Smith-Schuster, but now it's going to be a lot tougher to go ahead and double team Juju Smith-Schuster when you have Washington in there on the other side, someone that is so trusted with Mason Rudolph. He can't be let go now. If you're a defensive coach, you can't ignore that college connection.
Right.
So, with that being said, I do have to address the elephant in the room. Yes, Donte Moncrief had a horrendous game yesterday. A lot of people want his head on a platter, want him cut. I get it. But if he is not healthy enough to be in there, he should not be in there right now.
Right.
And is the finger a scapegoat? Is it a situation that you're just not going to see him again? Is it going to be like season 7 of Married with Children when they had a new kid on the show that it went so horribly that all of a sudden they just sent him upstairs and you never saw him again? I can't remember that kid's name. That was just an awful jump the shark moment. But so are you going to see Donte Moncrief again, Tony?
I think I'll see him again. I don't think you can make rash decisions after 2 games about anything, including Moncrief. Yeah, he's played poorly, but they also invested $9 million in him over the next 2 years. So he does have a resume, 200 catches in his career coming in. So he's been around the block. I would bench him for now and let him, think about some things, or at least get healthy if injuries are what's causing him to have the drops. But I wouldn't get rid of him just yet. No, I don't. I think it's too soon for that. But I do think you have to feature those 3 young guys as your top 3 receivers, at least starting this week in week 3.
So Now let's go ahead and open up to questions. In the last 5 minutes of the show, we're going to open it up to you. And if you want to go ahead and use the live chat for questions, feel free to do so. Also, if you want to go ahead and use the super chat to go ahead and be at the top of the queue, that would be great as well. I do apologize. I know we saw some super chat comments in there too, and I usually bring those up. That was earlier in the show, and I did not get a chance to bring them up. Here's one though. Michael Toole put in $1.99, release Moncrief and sign Des Bryant. Yeah, I'm just gonna politely say no. I don't like that idea.
Yeah,
but that's I mean, you're not the only one thinking that. I just don't think that's what this locker room and what this team needs. I think this team needs to take advantage of the young talent they have and develop it. And this has become a very young offense in a very big hurry. Right. So I think that's something that we can go ahead and look at as gospel right now. That you got very young on offense. I like the fact that, and it was just said here, and of course I passed it up. Ben Builder, the future is now. Yes, the future is definitely now. You're going to see what you have. You don't have, but here's the thing, Tony. We do not have to go ahead and say that this season is over. It's not. This season is not over, and I know that's Bryan and Tony being eternal optimists. I'm not ready to throw in the terrible towel on this, and there's no reason to do so. Here's a comment from MP. We have players. We need a sound technique development coach that can bring them up to speed with going over actual techniques, films, and yes, halftime adjustments. Now, I brought that up because, hey, this is something that Dave Schofield and I talked about earlier. We talked about the bright spots, and we talked about the people that are going to benefit from this new situation. Now, if somebody is on the hot seat more than anybody, it is the coaching staff.
Right.
Because now the coaching staff does not have the guy that is tried and true, the Hall of Famer, to bail them out. They have to work with a young, raw player that is not going to be perfect every single snap. But there is a lot of upside with this guy. So Mike Tomlin, I'm not saying hot seat, but his job has just gotten so much harder.
Right.
Randy Fichtner's job has gotten so much harder, but he definitely has a chance to go ahead and shine. We do have $2 from Cecil Clark. Thank you, Cecil. I appreciate that. And once again, if you do go ahead and throw something in on the super chat, know that money does go in for contests like the football that we're giving away, signed by David DeCastro. And if I understand that there's more exciting things coming too. $5 from Snowman. Everybody, enough of Des Bryant talk. He's washed up or he'd be signed. Yeah, the fact that he doesn't have a job right now, I think
it's pretty telling.
Yeah, I think at this point he's done. Another thing, while we're waiting, looking at a couple more questions, one thing that we did not talk about is who is going to be the backup quarterback. Missy Matthews went ahead and said that already. 53-man roster has welcomed in Devlin Hodges, so he is now on the 53-man roster. This changes some things, so this means that, we could definitely see Hodges going back if you do bring somebody in with more of a history. And there's some veterans out there. Please don't go ahead and scoff when I throw out some of these names. But there are some veterans that are on the couch right now, like a Brock Osweiler, like a Sam Bradford,
right,
like a Taylor Heineke. And if you don't know who that is, that's someone who destroyed them the Steelers in the last preseason game. He started a good bit in front of Cam Newton last year, but they might be looking at somebody with excuse me, somebody practice squad eligible. So you don't know what direction they're going to go, but there are some names that they could go out and bring in. I remember a few years ago they brought in Brian Hoyer, and
Right.
off the couch in November, and he stayed around, and he's still around.
Right.
So there's people that are going to be saying no to some of these guys, and that's it. But the bottom line is we got to see what the team's going to do. I'll bring it up because I know what you're looking at, and it's funny.
Yeah.
Sam Bradford gets hurt when you blow air on him. Yeah. Darren Dalton, Bad and Tony, have you guys heard about the Colin Kaepernick articles? What are your thoughts on the ideas? Look.
Articles, the new articles, or
so, of course, when there's an opening, the first name to come up is Colin Kaepernick. And I figured this was going to come up. And
Right.
So I was thinking about this. Look, there's no denying that Colin Kaepernick has talent.
Right.
He's a different kind of talent. But if you bring in a guy like Colin Kaepernick, that might stunt the growth of a guy like Mason Rudolph. Because now it becomes something different.
Right.
It now becomes controversial. It becomes something that would divide. I don't want to say divide the locker room, but it would bring a circus type atmosphere,
Right.
and it would be a distraction in that locker room at that point.
Right.
When you got rid of the distractions are gone for the most part. So look, if they brought in a guy like Colin Kaepernick, that would be something that they brought in as a business move.
And you see what
fans would not love it.
Yeah, and
but there would be some that would.
Right. Yeah, some that would, some that wouldn't, and I don't. Whether you agree with it or not, it would be a distraction because and they're trying to circle the wagons right now as an organization. That they have a lot going on. They don't need something else to go in that that they have to answer questions about that have nothing to do with football. So I think it would if they're going to bring in a veteran, it would be like a Sam Bradford, somebody like that, and not somebody like a Kaepernick who may or may not have the ability to be a good backup, but he would definitely bring too much baggage.
And and that's really, it's just direction of the team right now.
Right.
And that's the bottom line to that. And the team showed that they didn't care about controversy when they brought in Michael Vick.
Right.
And Tony and I still have the death threat emails from just mentioning that
Right.
on the site from a few years ago. So, there's a lot of things that could happen. Somebody brought up, what about Landry Jones? He knows the system. Landry Jones is blocked from returning to the NFL right now. He was the first player to be signed by Vince McMahon in the XFL, and he will not be let out of his contract to go ahead and do so because he is essentially the number one draft choice of the XFL right now. He's their first overall selection. So he is under contract with them, even though he doesn't have. I don't know if he has a team as of yet, but that's something that cannot happen. Whether you like that or not, it's not a bad idea to have somebody that knows the system like that. But it's he is off the table. So that's something I thought was interesting. Almost forgot about Kathy. She mentioned this a while ago. How do you feel about Dobbs' trade and Hodges number 2? I'm still behind, Kathy. I'm still behind the Dobbs trade because I just thought the upside of Dobbs was I thought he was nothing more than number 3. I think with Dobbs not being there right now, actually great guy, but it also makes it a little bit of a controversy if something happens with that Mason Rudolph has a rough game. All of a sudden, we're talking about bringing Dobbs, and there's a lot of stuff there when they're trying to develop a player. I know that might sound a little crazy, but I just kind of think that that fifth round draft choice will do this team so much better at that point. Right now, you're number 2 as of 6:46 p.m. when we're recording this live. On Monday evening, your number 2 quarterback is number 6, Devlin Hodges out of Samford. And the kid showed some skill. I'm not sure. And Tony, you could help me out with this. I'm not sure if he is going to remain on the 53-man roster. But before you do that, Snowman, $2. Will the Steelers sign a third quarterback? Kind of think they're going to. I think this was a move for right now while they figure some things out, because this is fresh. Tony, what are you thinking?
I think they should go. Honestly, I like Hodges. I like his story, but I think they should go with a veteran as their backup, just to give Rudolph somebody to lean on, because you know what it's like being new at work. You know, you want to have that veteran presence that you can just confide in, and it can give you advice, and somebody that's been around the block. So I think that's what they should do right now. I don't think you want to have 2 very young and very green guys as your top 2 quarterbacks right now. I think you need somebody like a Charlie Batch, that kind of player, somebody who's not going to be a threat to take the job, but somebody who can come in a pinch and maybe play well for a game or so.
Mark Tobin has a good idea. Sign Romo.
Well, he's too talented for CBS. They'll never let him go.
I know, they'd never let him go.
He's too much of a superstar.
I would do that in a heartbeat, though. I would love it. But Mark is talking about another retired player, and I would not dismiss this one too early. Call up Mark Sanchez. That's kind of interesting, Tony. What are your thoughts on that? Is he healthy?
I didn't even know he was. I thought he was somebody else's backup. I didn't know he was out of the league. I'd be all for pretty much any veteran quarterback at this point that just to have on the roster. That's not a distraction, I guess. Save for your obvious distractions. I would welcome just about anybody in as far as a backup.
And you know what? I mean, these are names. They know. You might have a name. Remember when Brian Hoyer came to town? Nobody knew who that guy was, and he ended up being not really with the Steelers, but ended up being a pretty good, a great backup quarterback in this league. But you just never know what they're going to do and who they're going to put stock in. I agree with Dave Schofield that I think they're going to have a guy with practice squad eligibility. Dave loves Taylor Heineke, and I'm not sure. He might have practice squad eligibility, but I don't know for a fact. Here's something interesting, and I'm going to bring this up. This is not my dad. My dad's name is Bill Davis, and I was joking with my dad. I'm like, I've got a Bill Davis on the live chat all the time, and I know it's not you because you guys have different views. I love this Bill Davis. Great quote. Mason Rudolph pulls a Steve Young. Yeah, take that. How awesome would that be?
If he can pull a Steve Young or a Aaron Rodgers or even an Andrew Luck, I'd be happy. Yeah.
We can't dismiss that either.
Right. Yeah. You don't know until you find out. That's why, again, that's the silver lining. You get to find out this year.
And now I want to bring this up. Dennis Sheridan. Those are all awful suggestions, says Dennis. And you know what? I'm not saying they're good. I'm just saying this is who's out there. Brock Osweiler is out there. You know what I mean? When we talked about him earlier, these guys are out there, but they're also, so is Paxton Lynch.
Yeah.
They're out there for a reason.
Yeah. If they were genius suggestions, they'd be signed. They wouldn't be out there.
Wow. We've got our first Tebow sighting. Sean Manahan. Thanks, Sean.
I saw Broadway Joe. So there you go. Funny.
Oh, we got a Broadway Joan. That's
yeah.
Joe. That's great. Mateo Cecilia, mentions Connor Cook. Yeah, there's names out there, but they're not they're really not. Oh, Cree, come on. I'm not bringing in Magnum PI. I would bring in the real. I would bring in
Well,
Tom
that'd be
Selleck
awesome. That
in a
would
second,
be
but not
entertaining.
Mark Malone. So now we're getting it. When we start getting to Don Strock, thanks George Teston. When we start getting there, it's time to wrap up the show. But here's the thing: I'm thinking the guy that we need to talk about right now is Mason Rudolph. And look, I'm gonna go back to the beginning. I'm not happy that Ben Roethlisberger is on the sidelines. I wish he was getting ready for the San Francisco game this week, but it is our reality. And Dennis brings up the fact, what's Ben? Chopped liver. He'll be on the sidelines helping Mason. Yeah, good. And he already said he's going to do that. And I think that's, Dennis, good point. Ben's going to be there, but we're going to talk about people to bring in. But the bottom line is, it's good we're talking about backups. And right now, nobody's talking about replacing Mason Rudolph. So I'm pretty excited about, in our reality, the silver lining to this whole thing is that you have a guy that you felt good enough to trade up for, not just to beat the Cincinnati Bengals out of a pick, but you traded a third round pick to go, what was it, a third round pick that they traded for him, or the second they got from Martavis Bryant, something like that? I believe it was a third. And you felt really good about him to go ahead and bring him in. So this is your guy right now, and I am ready to rally around Mason Rudolph. Tony, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's why sports is the greatest reality TV show, because you never know what can happen. Mason Rudolph might just be some obscure name in Steelers history. Then again, he might be one of the greatest success stories in Steelers history. You'll never know until you tune in this Sunday and see how his career starts. I mean, look at Tom Brady, look at Kurt Warner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You never know when the next great story is where it's gonna come from. So might as well be Mason Rudolph, and I'm going to be rooting hard for him this Sunday.
Okay, before we go, I've got to bring this up because when I see the name Mr. Tummy, I cannot ignore a comment from Mr. Tummy, because I love the name. Someday I would love to know the inspiration behind Mr. Tummy. Mason produced more production versus Ben with fewer drives in the same wide receiver group. I'm excited to see what Mason can do. I think we all are. Sean Manahan, Ben was your fantasy quarterback. He was one of mine, too. I'm looking at the one comment too. It's kind of an inside thing. Cree, yes, there was a conversation yesterday about that. Get with Dave Schofield on that, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that. But with everything else being said, thank you so much. I love our Steeler community, and here's the thing for me. This is a rough week. You lose your quarterback, you lose a game, and a game that you really shouldn't have lost. And we get a chance to, right now, 174 of us, and then Tony and I make 176. And we get a chance to heal together. And that's what the Hangover is all about. That's what BTSC is all about. Sean Manahan says, we may suck, but we're Steeler fans for life. Hey, right now we do.
Right.
But hey, that might not be the same thing in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and in week 17. So with that being said, my name is Bryan Anthony Davis, and you, my friends, I want to thank you because you've just been hungover. Good night. All righty.